going to move on to the covering the molecular business. And just about everyone I've taught this to or has read about it finds it quite interesting and are looking forward to the time when the molecular business can be manifest. But the interesting thing about business is that business, unlike everything else in the social system of humanity, has been about almost the same from the beginning. From the beginning of civilization, somebody starts a business. Maybe they, uh, may, maybe thousands of years ago, somebody started a business of making wheels or something, or shoes, or clothing. And he's the boss of his business, and if he hires employees, he hires these employees, and he becomes an authority with these employees, and almost like a little dictator, and he tells these employees what to do and how to do it. And if they don't do it, he fires them and replaces them with somebody else. And so that's basically been how business has worked on from a lower level to a higher level for since the beginning of civilization. But we're finally reaching a point in the evolution of humanity where business will evolve. All kinds of other things in humanity has evolved, but now it's time for businesses themselves to evolve to a higher level. And everything in humanity on a social level gravitates toward the molecular order. And the molecular order shifts things, authority from the top down to the more centered on the bottom up. You, well, it's actually a balance between the two, a balance between top down and bottom up, so they both have the highest beneficial effect. And in past ages, everything has been centered on the top down. Now, the government in past ages has been totally from the top down. When they had tribes in ancient times, the tribal leader give the orders and everybody had to obey. Then we switched to kingdoms, and then we had a king or a dictator, and he gave the orders from the top down and everybody had to obey. And then we broke, we evolved, and we created democratic systems where the people actually had some participation. Unfortunately, the top-down people, the people in authority, kind of rebelled against this, and they have twisted the democratic society. So we have a lot more shift balance on the top down than the bottom up, but we're slowly making inroads. Now, the molecular business will do the same thing. It's going to shift from total top down. And business it's almost highly centered on top down. In other words, you have the boss, tells you what to do, you do it, or you get punished, or you don't get your raise, or maybe you get fired. So this the business world is eventually shifting, so it's not all top down. Now, the paramount principle of the molecular relationship is that it also encourages initiation. And where there's more freedom, there's more power to initiate. And so we have, if we shift from the top down to where we have the balance, where we have a flow of energy from the bottom up and the top down, then there's more freedom. When there's more freedom, there's more power to initiate, and there's more efficiency. But even with initiation, it needs to be encouraged. Because if you have a sense of freedom, then you have more power to start things and get things done. In regular business, if you're an employee and you see a better way of doing things, you don't have any power to, often you don't have any power to initiate anything. You can maybe tell your boss, give him a suggestion, and he'll usually ignore it. So you don't really have much power to um, initiate things in a regular business. Now, since the beginning of human history, the basic mode of operation has been the same. The man with the bucks has power to initiate a commercial endeavor. So you have the situation where the boss is like the king. A business is like a miniature kingdom. And it's not like, it doesn't correspond to a democracy. It corresponds to more like the old kingdom where you have a king and the king puts out the orders and tells everybody what to do. And he'll have advisors and he takes advice, but he has the final authority. So a regular business is a little bit like a dictatorship, and the people who are in it are a little bit like slaves. But fortunately for the business world, you maybe say you work 5 days a week, 8 days, 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week. So only 40 hours a week, you're a slave, and then the rest of the time you're free. Unlike slaves in ancient times, there were slaves 24 hours a day. You're just maybe a slave 40 hours a week. But basically, the slave has a master, the master tells him what to do, he's got to do it or else. And this is the way the regular business works. Now, that's fine if you have a good boss that's a nice guy. And you may think, well, this is a good system because I like my boss and he treats me well. But then what if your boss is replaced by a guy that's a total son of a gun? Okay, so um, then all of a sudden you're in a situation where you do not like it at all. You do feel like a slave in this situation where you have a boss that's just barking orders all day long. And so this situation needs to change. If you in a situation where you have a boss that's maybe a good guy, but he still has powers of dictatorship, you have the potential situation where it can turn on you if your boss is replaced by the wrong person. So a system needs to be developed where you don't have this threat. You don't have the threat of having a boss over you that can make your life a living hell, and there's nothing you can do about it. So this situation needs to be changed. This and everything also needs to be more efficient. In regular businesses, we have a difficult time with efficiency. Now, the solution to establishing more efficiency in business is the creation of a relationship which will eliminate the authoritarian power to control our desire to initiate, yet at the same time, give the leader power to do his job. The difference between a spiritual molecule and a business one is numerous here. Uh, the number 3 will always be incorporated in anything that's successful. And the number 3 is an interesting number. In the government of the United States, for instance, we have 3 segments that govern our system here. We have the presidency of the United States, we have the Congress, and we have the judiciary. So the presidency is like represents the first ray of power, and the um, the Congress represents like the third ray of active energy, and then the judicial branch represents the love, wisdom, energy. Now they're not perfect, but they create a powerful focus of energy because they have there's a trinity involved. And DK tells us that all life begins with triangles. Triangles are actually the foundation of life itself in this system, which is interesting. Now, there's three basic problems that cause inefficiency in business that the molecular relationship will correct. Number one problem is poor choice of management for key positions. If you've ever worked for a sizable company, you probably had some boss over you. You probably thought, how did this person ever get in this position? Because there's a lot of people more qualified or could do it better than him. But here he is, and there's nothing you can do about it. Now, Scott, you work for a pretty big company. Can you kind of identify with that? Have you ever worked for, had a boss you wondered how in the world he got to be the boss?
Yeah, there's been a lot of them.
Yeah, have you ever thought, boy, somebody wasn't thinking when they put this guy in position, but once he's there, well, he stays there for maybe years. A
I just
second,
had a situation where the I really liked. He's gone now, but the boss we had in the number one position, I really liked him, and I really liked how he did everything he was doing. Except he hired a guy in the number two position that was so inept and just the opposite of him, and I had to. I started wondering what was wrong with with the main boss, how he could make such a mistake is to hire this other guy. That guy removed himself. He he did some major bad things and got removed, but I started wondering how this other guy could make such a decision.
yeah, and that's one of the problems is the people that are bosses over you, the employees, the people there are have authority over didn't have any say so in the matter. He was selected by somebody higher up that's not really that familiar with the needs of the actual group that's doing the work. Okay, the second problem is employees are not committed enough. The typical employee wants to go to work, put in his 8 hours, and go home and not think about work anymore. And if many employees are not very committed to the good of the whole concerning the company, they just want to take home a paycheck. But employees need to be more committed in how that will transpire, that will be corrected through the molecular business. Okay. The third thing is inflexible and unfair wage scales. There's a lot of unfairness in the way that employees are paid. What's interesting is right now, in the major companies of the United States, the payment of the CEO in relation to the average worker in the company, guess how many more times, how much larger the payment is the CEO receives than the average worker of the major corporations of the United States? How many
12 times.
times?
12 times.
How many times?
12.
12? No, you're way off. Somebody else want to guess?
100.
60.
You're all way off. Guess again.
4 times.
What? How many times?
4 times.
4 times? No.
4.
Yeah, you're way off.
Well, he gets, when he retires often with millions and millions of dollars, where the average worker is working for $15 or a minimum wage.
Right, and we're talking about his average yearly compensation, though. His average yearly compensation is how many more times than the average? Now, like in Amazon, the lower levels get $15 an hour, but some of them maybe get up to $100 an hour. So the average in Amazon may be something like $30 an hour or something, rather than. So you got to look at the average. We're talking, and the average is with some of these companies isn't that bad, but the CEO let's have 2 more guesses. You've been guessing too low, everybody.
1,000 times.
I got to admit that's too high, Adam. But
200.
150. I bid.
200 is the closest so far. It's 320 times the average wage that's in a typical company. 320 times. Now, does that seem fair? And how did they get away with that? That's the question. Because one of the reasons they get away with it is because they have too much authority, too much power. So they have so much power and influence, they can almost dictate how much they get paid.
Wow.
Now, what's interesting is this problem is getting worse. CEO compensation rose 1,167% between 1978 to 2019. Meanwhile, the typical workers' compensation for the same time period rose how much percent? Guess. The CEO compensation rose over 1,100, over 1,000%. Okay. Average worker raise in that same time period, 13%. Isn't that amazing? What's going on here?
They get away with that.
Yeah.
Hey, JJ.
Yeah.
The question in my mind is that one parable where the employer employs 3 different workers at different times of the day, and some of them did less hours of work but got the same pay or whatever that was, however that went.
Oh yeah.
But it's an agreement. Yeah, it's an agreement between the employer and the worker to work for that wage and for that amount of work. And so I guess I'm struggling to see the problem with that, because if I go to work somewhere, they tell me what I'm going to get paid and what's required of me, and I agree to it, and then it's an agreement, and I got to uphold my end of the deal.
Right. You have a point there, but on the other hand, let's suppose another company started up that instead of paying their upper echelons obscene amounts, that money is shared among the employees, and the average employee makes 30% more than you're making now doing the same thing. Would you be interested in maybe switching companies then?
No, everybody would. Everybody would be standing in line to work for that company.
Right, and that's the point of the molecular business, and this is what the molecular business will do. It will make things better for the majority of the employees, and that's what we're looking at. Now in this ratio, what's interesting, in 2018, the ratio was 293 to 1. And back in 1989, which isn't that long ago, it was 61 to 1. So, and a lot of this problem has happened because the government interfered, because the government comes in and they try to solve problems. So they saw this 61 to 1 ratio and they thought that was bad. So they went in and they made certain laws that tried to correct the problem, but then they got around this problem by paying the CEOs in stock. And so the problem just got worse. And so it's so typical, just like when I was younger and had my accident when I was 13, I spent 3 months in the hospital. We paid it all off. Had 6 surgeries, and when I had the accident, I was 13, and my dad had taken off to Central America. My parents were divorced, and we had no child support, and we were working for either minimum wage or picking fruit or mowing lawns or whatever to make money. And we paid it all off with no government help, no child support, no nothing except relying on us and the resources available outside of government. And that could not happen today. In other words, back then, we had universal health care, where even a fruit picker could pay off 3 months in the hospital. Okay, so, but we had a great system back then. And then the government says, well, let's step in and let's see if we can help these people with their medical problems. And as soon as the government stepped in to help, everything went sky high. My hospital bill was $8 a day, which translates to about $100 a day in today's money. Okay. Today, a day in the hospital is $3,000-$4,000. Okay. So that's the difference between just leaving it up to a free society so that they can just have take care of things on their own, and then the government stepping in to help. When the government steps in to help, everything begins to fall apart. And people think, well, if mine's, yeah.
Sorry, it seems to me that if the government stepped in and the prices went so high, it must be true that the government's plan worked. That's a joke, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
I'm making a joke.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a joke, really, when you think about it. But yeah, back when I was spent those 3 months in the hospital, a lot of people that came and went that I met that was staying there, they would come in for a couple of days just so the doctor could keep an eye on them. So if a guy goes back in that day, if you went to a doctor and the doctor says, well, I'm not sure what's causing your problem, let's put you in the hospital a couple of days so I can keep an eye on you. You know, and they actually had to pay for that, but it wasn't that bad because the cheapest room where I was $8 a day. I got the cheapest one, and the most expensive one was $14 a day. And so the average person that was employed could afford to go to the hospital just to be observed. Nowadays, nobody would do that because you can't afford $3,000-$4,000 a day to just go in and be observed. But back then it was as cheaper than a motel is today. So it's amazing. So anyway, there's a solution to every problem, and the molecular business is, as we will cover this, is creates a tremendous solution to the problems. Now, okay, any questions or comments before we move on there on this?
I had to pick up some medication for a little acid reflux, and Medicare paid most of it, but just a month's supply would have cost me $160 if I had to pay for it. It ended up costing me $3.60, which I thought was about what they were worth.
Right, and people think, well, I got this great insurance that pays 80% and I only have to pay 20, but even if you have to pay the 20% now, it's still several times more expensive than it was when I had my accident. And so it's, even if you only have to pay 20% now, it's still more expensive than it was in 1958 when this happened to me, even figuring inflation. So that's amazing. What's funny is people complain more about the price of gas going up than they do the price of medical prices going up. But back in 1958, when I had my accident, my hospital room was $8 a day, and the price of gas was 39.9 cents a gallon. Okay. Now, if the price of gas went up the same amount as the medical expenses, the gas would be, I can't remember what I figured it out to be, would be hundreds of dollars a gallon. And if you had to pay $400 a gallon for gas, you would be complaining about gas. But what's funny about it is people complain more about gas going up, but the price of gas is just gone up pretty much in line with inflation, maybe a little less. So yet people complain so much about the big oil making all these big bucks, and they don't seem to mind pouring billions of dollars into that's wasted in the medical system. And okay, now the next section we're going to cover is the selection of key positions in a company. Now, how a company evolves. Note how a company evolves until we have managers seeking to maintain their power and employees afraid to criticize. The employee is forced to support the bad ideas of his boss. So basically, how a business starts is they all start pretty much the same. You have an individual or a small group of individuals get some idea, okay? They think, well, this will make a good business. So they start this business and they start hiring employees, and they have total authority over the employees, as they should have at this point. And it begins to grow, and then they can't control everything, so they select people in management positions. And then as it grows, you have managers over managers over managers until you have a hierarchy. And what's interesting is this grows, and who selects the bosses? The bosses are all the management are all selected from the top down. And then the employees are pretty much under a system comparable to a dictatorship, if we were to compare it to regular government. They have to do pretty much what they're told without questioning. It's kind of like the system of the three monkeys. They hear no evil, see no evil, and speak no evil of them that are over them. So the employees Uh, a good employee is one that doesn't complain and supports the boss over him, tries to make him look good, and he sees no evil, hears no evil. And if he sees a problem with his boss, he's very careful about it. If he reports him to the one above him, then his boss will really come down on him even worse. So there's not a lot of freedom here. The molecular relationship is really a new emancipation proclamation. The worker, like I say, often feels like a slave, and he needs an emancipation proclamation for the worker itself. Now, the idea is very simple, and the seeds of its manifestation already surround us. But it has not demonstrated itself in business for one major reason. People in authority love the power that it gives them, and they will use this power at all cost to keep their power in place. Now, we really see this in the politics today. The people in power in the political world, it's so obvious that they are willing to do anything possible to keep their power. If anything threatens their power, they will lie, cheat, steal, harm, hurt, do everything they can to anybody that threatens their power. If you threaten the power of a political person, you put your life pretty much in danger, because they will do anything legal that doesn't put them in jail to keep their power. And this also applies to business. If a person is in a position of power in a business, he will do everything he can to keep that position of power, and also have the opportunity to move up and to a greater position of power. And this need for power, this desire for power produces a corruption and an inefficiency, and prevents a lot of good things being done in politics and business. Wherever power is sought to be preserved, you have inefficiency. And you'll notice that whenever, like in politics, whenever there's a new program created, if it turns out to be bad and doesn't work, does it go away? No, they just keep it, because there's somebody there that's in power over this segment that's not working, but he doesn't want to let it go, and everybody involved doesn't want to let it go. So once you have something created in business or politics that gives people a points of power, it's really hard to do away with it. If you try to do away with it, everybody in power will turn around and attack those who are trying to take it away. So that's one of the problems with any organization that exists in the world today, is this tremendous desire for power, and to hold on to it produces tremendous inefficiency. So because of this desire for power, the molecular business that we're going to introduce, will have to be built from the bottom up. We can't go to a big business like IBM or Apple or somebody like this and say, hey, this is how the molecular business works. The only trouble is the people in power are going to have to relinquish some of that power, and what do you think their response will be? they'll say, man, we're not letting go of our power. We like having all this power. Okay. So that's why we just cannot go to established businesses and teach them how the molecular business works, where power is from the bottom up and top down reaches the balance instead of top down power structure. Because power from the top down is diminished, it will have to be started from the bottom up. And it has to be started with a fairly substantial number of people. It can't be, the first one can't be done with just a small business. It has to be a fairly substantial investment. But when it happens, it's going to revolutionize the world. Okay, the power to fill positions in the molecular business then will be reversed. Instead of having this power vested from the top downwards, it will be given from the bottom upwards and will be applied through a democratic system and that takes the elements out of the molecular relationship we've been talking about and applies them to a business. Now, the difference here in the molecular relationship, we're talking about applying it in a spiritual relationship. In the business, we take the practical things out of the molecular relationship and we apply it to business, so that it's I guess you could say all things are spiritual, but business isn't really seen as a spiritual endeavor, even though from one point of view it could be, since it benefits humanity. But it will have the practical things taken out of the molecular relationship and applied to business. Now, the funny thing about how a regular business works is it works a lot on what we call the Peter principle. Has anyone read about the Peter principle? Do you know how that works?
How that works.
Yeah.
Yeah, Curtis?
Yeah, or if you have a level, 4 levels in your business, and you have a guy that's operating really well at level 2, he's promoted up to level 3, but he's not very good at level 3. He's reached his maximum potential at level 2, but he's been promoted up to level 3, and like you say, because he likes power and because he's ensconced in this position, he stays there. But he's not good at that level. He's inept. And so he doesn't do the business any good. In fact, he does it more harm than good. And that's the Peter principle, is that you rise to a level that you're no longer efficient at.
Yeah, what's funny about how this works, yeah, you say you have a person that's a really good engineer and he's really good at it, okay? And the authorities above him say, boy, this guy is really good. Let's promote him. So they promote him and he's still an engineer, but he's got a promotion and he's happy. And then they say, boy, he's really doing good. Let's promote him to manager. So they promote him to be a manager and he's no longer doing engineering work, but he's just managing. But he's a really poor manager, okay? Good engineer, but poor manager. And so what do? Well, the guy doesn't want to quit because he's getting more money as a manager. So he likes that idea. So he's not quitting. And they say, well, if we fire him, we may get sued, you know, with all these new laws they got. So what are we going to do with this guy? So they just leave him there, okay? So he's no longer productive. He's no longer doing what he's good at. He's promoted until he reaches a position that he's bad at, okay? And this is what produces the inefficiency in hierarchies, is people are promoted until they get in a position where they're no good. And then they stay there. And this is why bureaucracies are so inefficient. This is why when the government steps in and says, we're here to help you, that you want to run. Because the people that are there to help you are often people that have been promoted to a position that they're no good at. And so they just hang and stay there. Now, AT&T, I read, I think it was AT&T, this is many years ago, looked at this Peter Principle problem, and they said, well, we can't fire these guys because if we fire them, we may face lawsuits and everything. So how can we handle this situation? So they actually created this building, and they took all the people that were not good at their jobs, and they put them in this building, and they give them, they let them keep their title, but all they did was push papers around. But they continued to draw their big salary and keep their title. And then they replaced these guys with people that were more efficient. And so they had these inefficient people in this big building, and they all collected a lot of money, but they did nothing. But the AT&T said the whole purpose was to get these guys out of the way so they weren't interfering anymore. So they grouped them all together and they continued to pay them, and they did nothing for the company. So I thought that was one of the funniest stories I've ever read. I don't know if it's true or not, but I read that. It sounds like it certainly could be true.
Sounds like they were just a big write-off.
Okay. I like Bruce Willis's line in Die Hard. Bruce Willis, he was a lower echelon guy, and he had the solution to the problem that developed with these terrorists taking over the building. And he had to deal with this guy that was one of these guys that had been promoted to a position of leadership that wasn't any good at it. And Bruce Willis was talking to him, and he says to him, "You're not part of the solution, pal. You're part of the problem." And the guy was really insulted, and he did everything he could to put roadblocks in the way of old Bruce Willis. And as we know, Bruce Willis finally was able to prevail thanks to a cop that helped him out that was a lower echelon cop that saw what the problem was and give him some assistance. It's kind of funny.
So in the molecular relationship, can, let's say a person sees a person above him that's not doing anything, he's inept, he's kind of a sluggard, and let's say I'm below him. Now, you'd have two choices. I could either just use my initiation and rise above independently because I'm doing something that's helping the business, or could I challenge that person's position? And,
right, and this is we're reaching the end of our time, but this is what we're going to talk about. Is in the molecular business, everything is controlled by election, and when you have a boss over you, you have a say-so as to who that boss will be. And you also have a say-so as how much power he has. And so this is what we're going to talk about next week, is how this, the process of election and free will enter in, and how it affects the power to initiate. So it's quite interesting. And I think by the time we're done with this, you will think, boy, I wish I worked for a molecular business. And until then, the best thing you can do is just start your own business. Like Curtis is a small business guy, and he hires one or two people every now and then, and he's the total boss over and tell them what to do. But that's the way the system works right now. But at least Curtis started his business. He's free to do whatever he wants with his business. And this is why many people today, even though they're maybe working for a company where they're making good money and got good health insurance, many will quit and go into business for themselves just because they like the freedom of being able to do what they want and do their business according to what they think is the best, even though they got to work longer hours and struggle and maybe not make as much money to begin with anyway. So what do you think, Curtis? Do you cherish that freedom you have to just make your own decisions in your business?
Oh, you better believe it. Yeah, when I first started, I had to knock on doors and advertise like crazy, and it was a real struggle. And now I just sit back and the phone rings and I go where I'm called, and I set my own hours, and I've never made as much money as I'm making now. I have no helpers at this point. When I did, I paid them 25% of whatever I brought in right off the top. So but after a while, most of my workers thought they owned the company and would show up whenever they wanted it.
Yeah.
No, that's my job.
Right. Anybody else have their own business? I'm not sure what everybody here does for a living. Didn't you have your business, own business at one time, Ed?
Yeah, I did. I had a surveying business, and I had 6 crews that went out every day and did work. And
Wow, you had quite a thing going then, didn't you?
yeah, and then, well, working with contractors, you find that you can go past zero in a hurry because they don't really feel that they need to pay you, and you have payroll due every 2 weeks, about $40,000, and so it's kind of a difficult thing to have employees.
Yeah, you made a lot of sacrifice, but I would guess you felt it was worth it because it's nice to be able to make your own decisions, isn't it?
Well, it was nice, and it was nice to be able to create business happening and create employment for people.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, Ed still has revenue coming in, don't you, Ed, for your efforts?
I do.
Well, good. Well, you worked hard and you deserve it. Yep. Okay, anybody else got their own business?
Yeah, I do.
You have your own business, Solomon? Oh,
Gary.
What's your business?
Into water engineering savings, water treatment.
Yeah. Okay. And Terry, do you have your own business too?
Yes, I work as an independent consultant for in international development. So I work for big organizations, World Bank, WHO, UNICEF, and all those people. Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
enjoy the freedom of not having a boss over you telling you what to do all the time?
Not quite. Well, the people you work for, your clients are your boss for each work. And every time you need to do a job, you need to put a proposal, put a CV and all that, but it's there's a level of freedom that you enjoy in a way that you have control. I work mainly in monitoring and evaluation, which means I go and see what people have done. And that's a lot of power. You actually, tell them, especially people who are not being, they are being mean, not doing the work properly, where the target people, the population are not getting the benefits for which the project has been done. You have that power to make sure that those big guys do not continue to oppress the small people who are the attention of the benefits.
Yeah, you make a good point though. Our clients are a boss, but they go easier on us than the bosses. They're, I've been in business for myself most of my life, and your customers, some of them are kind of hard to work with, but most of them are reasonable. So it's they're and some of them are kind of fun to work with actually. So anyway, our time's up. Any more comments or questions before we wrap it up here? Next week, we'll go into the nitty gritty of how the molecular business works and the principles involved. And I think you'll find it interesting. So we'll look forward to seeing you next week. Until then.
Hey, JJ,
Yeah, yeah.
I was gonna say, next week, when you explain how the molecular business is gonna work, I have a perfect idea for us starting our company that falls into all the guidelines of the molecular business that you wrote. So it's
Okay, well,
something that will-
we'll get that input next week then.
Good night.
And go from there. Oh, I see Joe's still with you there. Good to see you, Joe. Okay,
You too, thank you.
you betcha. Okay, we'll see you guys next, we'll plan on next Sunday at 2 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. Until then, be well.
Hasta la vista, baby.